Today's episode is brought to you by Positively Productive Systems, whose mission is to be the antidote to your stress and to provide compassionate productivity resources and coaching that help you heal and achieve. Be sure to check out both free and paid resources at positivelyproductive.com/resources.
When we think about marketing and we think about our businesses online, we need to think about what are the images that we're using in our business? Are they all people that look like you? Whether that's your race, your gender, your age, your body size, your religion, right? There's so many different aspects, your abilities, right? So making sure that everybody knows that they are represented and welcomed in your business.
You're listening to the Positively Living Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Zawrotny, founder of Positively Productive Systems and a coach certified in time and stress management, helping clients make space for what matters most in their lives. Join me each episode and we'll talk about decluttering, stress management, habits, personalized productivity, gratitude, and so much more. I understand the overwhelm of life because I'm a wife, mom to kids and cats, and a former caregiver. I'm here to help you choose what's right for you so you can do less, live more, and breathe easier. Sound good? Let's get to it. Hi, welcome to the Positively Living Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa, and today we're talking about ways to be more welcoming in our marketing through accessibility. Do you use captioning on your videos, and do you know why it's a must? Have you seen the bracketed text on social media posts and wondered how to go about doing that and what it accomplishes? Did you know that emojis, as fun as they are, can actually be problematic for your posts? Join my guest, Meg Brunson, and me today as we dig into these points and more. I met Meg in 2018 and was welcomed onto her podcast, The Familypreneur Show, as a guest to talk about cutting through the chaos and clutter. We've stayed connected through the years as our businesses have grown and changed, and she has now rebranded to Just Marketing for her business and podcast. Meg is an online marketing authority and former Facebook employee who combines her mission to build a more accessible and inclusive world with her expertise in the digital marketing space. After a decade of working with the deaf and disabled communities and years of watching her kids face racism and transphobia firsthand, Meg has seen how the way we communicate can isolate, divide, and harm historically marginalized groups. Through Just Marketing, Meg is committed to making a difference through being and building accessible, inclusive, anti-racist, and profitable businesses. Today, Meg helps us understand what accessibility and inclusivity are, how they connect, and 3 simple ways we can take to be accessible in the online space. Our conversation today reminded me of the saying, when we know better, we do better. So I'm excited to further this awareness because that's where it starts. I had begun to make changes, but Meg unintentionally called me out for something I've been doing for a while now that I didn't realize was an issue. Let's just say you're going to start seeing a change in the way I use emojis from now on. And one of my favorite parts was how we identified the bonus reasons for using these accessibility approaches. Bonus reasons that can actually help your current audience as well as those you want to attract and welcome. There's a lot to the topic of accessibility, especially as it relates to inclusivity. So Meg and I did our best to touch the surface and give you the awareness and ways to begin the process. I'm linking to her podcast if you'd like to deep dive into these topics, and I'd love to hear directly from you if this conversation resonated. This would be a great episode to screenshot and share with your takeaways. This way we can spread the message and these simple steps. Be sure to tag me on Instagram and Twitter at positively_Lisa or on Facebook and LinkedIn at Positively Productive. Welcome, Meg Brunson, to the Positively Living Podcast. I am so excited to have you here.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here, Lisa.
And this is a really big deal because we were doing the math and I joined you on your podcast in 2018. And I've wanted to have you join me for some time now. It's a long time coming, and boy, oh boy, is this a great topic to have you join me for. So before we get started on the topic itself, I'd love it if you would tell us a bit about who you are, who you help, and what makes you light up.
Awesome. So I am a mom first and foremost. I have four incredible kiddos. I can't believe they're getting bigger and bigger. They're 7, 9, 11, and 15 now. So I've got four incredible kids. They really inspired me to leave the 9 to 5 hustle in order to be a more present mom with them. We travel full time. We've been on the road over 3 years. We visited all 48 of the continental US states. I do eventually want to get to Hawaii and Alaska, but for now, we've made some incredible memories. And I work in the area of marketing. So I primarily help other entrepreneurs and small business owners to amplify their message, to increase their income, and to increase their impact. I'd say that's a brief little synopsis of me and who I am. And as far as what lights me up, I feel like it's my kids and travel, being able to see new places, being able to expose my kids to new things and watch as their gears turn and as they learn and as they get to experience the world in a way that I wish I had been able to do. They're learning so much more from this firsthand experience than I was able to learn in a traditional school setting. So it's been really cool.
Yeah, I mean, travel is such a teacher for sure. Well, I have to say, what lights me up about what you do is it's a combination of things. One is the joy you bring to everything that you do. And the other, which is the reason I asked you to talk about this today, is your inclusivity in what you do and how you stand. You are a voice for others, and you show us how it's done, and you show us how it's done through the lens of marketing, which I think is so incredibly important, especially for us entrepreneurs who want to do things the right way and want to make a difference and want to get our voice out there, but do it in a way that's kind and inclusive.
Oh my gosh, it makes me so happy. Like it really warms my heart to hear you talking about me in that way. And I purposely didn't get too deep into that stuff in my introduction because I knew that's what we were going to be talking more about. But I guess another like aspect of my family that I can touch on is that I've got a diverse family. So my oldest kiddo is Black. My second oldest kiddo, their pronouns are they, them. They're finding themselves in this queer community. You know, they identify as queer, but their titles are ever changing as they figure out where they fit. And over the past, I don't know, 4 to 6 years, I feel like we've seen a lot of ugly. We've seen a lot of ugly in the news, and I've seen a lot of it in person through my kids. And there's a big part of me that lived in this like aloof little bubble for a long time. You know, the word privilege gets thrown out a lot. I know that can be a triggering word for some people, but I grew up in this little bubble of privilege where like I didn't realize that racism was still a problem. I didn't realize that the LGBTQIA plus community was facing so much stigma and hatred in the day-to-day life. And so a big part of my, I guess my mission is to be just open about what I'm seeing, what we're seeing as a family and how that impacts my kids, in the hopes that other people who are still living in a little bit of that bubble will start to see some of the reality that's going on in the world. And travel is another thing that really helped open my eyes to that because our country is so diverse. Like we've been to all corners of the country and seen so much. So yeah, I feel like I just went on a little tangent, but that's a little bit about what really drives me there.
But I think that's an important tangent. Of course, I would say that, what with having a podcast where we're literally like going on tangents. But the point of this is that we want to have these conversations. That's why I do what I do here, right? To elevate these conversations in such a way that we create awareness. And all I kept thinking about in preparation for our chat was the phrase of, when you know better, you do better, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it starts with awareness. It starts with an understanding. So with that in mind, that's our segue into defining these ideas of what it means to be accessible, inclusive.
So for me, accessibility is really about, I don't want to use the word accessible again, but being able to access, being able to use, to consume, to attend, depending upon whatever it is we're doing. So when you think of accessibility in a physical location, that's
Mhm.
like the ramp that allows the wheelchair to go to the next level, instead of stairs or an elevator. What accessibility looks like online is a little bit different. It's a little bit different. And in one example would be a screen reader. So somebody who's got a vision impairment or somebody who's blind can't see the computer screen. They use assistive technology to read them what's on the screen. And that's one example for accessibility that a lot of people, I believe, are unaware of. They're unaware of some of the unique situations that screen readers bring. And then on the flip side, inclusivity. And again, this is like my definition. I'm sure you could Google it and find something much prettier and more formal. But inclusivity is when people see themselves in your work and feel welcomed to be there. So, like, as a plus size person myself, if I'm looking at advertisements and all the people are super, super skinny with no curves, I feel like I can't shop there, right? Like, I walk by Abercrombie, I do not go in because I do not see myself represented. I don't see myself as being welcomed in that store. Not to throw shade on Abercrombie, but I think you hear where I'm coming from. That's one example, right? When we think about marketing and we think about our businesses online, we need to think about what are the images that we're using in our business? Are they all people that look like you? Whether that's your race, your gender, your age, your body size, your religion, right? There's so many different aspects, your abilities, right? So making sure that everybody knows that they are represented and welcomed in your business.
And I love the overlap that I'm seeing here, which is why I wasn't just like, okay, let's just talk about accessibility or inclusivity or, like it's all connected. I say this all the time. So nobody who's listened to me before is shocked at that comment. So this idea of accessible and inclusive, and I love your definition. I need look no further. This idea of when people see themselves in your work or, in your space and feel welcome to be there. I'm also thinking that when you make something accessible, especially if someone is challenged in a way to normally access what you're providing, you are being inclusive because they feel welcome and they see themselves. It's like, oh, okay, you're acknowledging me and what I go through in my life. I think there's a really beautiful connection, and it all seems to come back to being welcoming and being kind.
Yep, exactly. Kind and compassionate.
I love that. You talked about trends like this idea of the screen reader, this kind of awareness, but I'd love to hear some more, examples. What are we seeing? What would it look like to have this accessibility, or what are we seeing out there?
Before we dive into screen readers, I feel like we could have a whole podcast episode on screen readers and the issues they provide. But I think when people think of accessibility, the most common thing we think of are captions on videos. So that's one way to easily make sure your content is accessible to people who cannot hear or just prefer reading. Like, we're talking a lot about disabilities and things that people don't have a choice over, but we also have to realize that each one of us has choice, and there are ways that we prefer to consume content. So not only is doing this like the kind thing to do for people who may not be exactly like you, but it also allows you to be more accessible to people who just have preferences. I prefer to watch videos or listen to audio than reading, but some people prefer reading. So captions and transcriptions would be one thing. And there's tons of programs that allow you to do captions and transcriptions online. I can give some recommendations, or it's a pretty easy Google search there. And then when it comes to the screen reader, oh gosh, there's so much things. First of all, this is the hardest part that we can talk about emojis. We use emojis too much. Everybody does. Everybody uses emojis too much. The recommended number of emojis is 2 to 3 per post, and you should only put them at the end of your content. And the reason is each emoji has what's called alt text, and we can talk a little bit more about alt text in a minute. But what that little bit of text does is it tells the screen reader what to say when it encounters an emoji. And there's so many emojis now. So like it might say something like grinny smiling face with two hands. And it's going to say that little snippet, or like purple heart, red heart, yellow heart, green heart. And the person listening is like, okay, get to the point already. So I am guilty of this too. All right. I am guilty of this too. It's cute. It's cute to look at. They're super fun, but we have to try to dial it back. We don't want to use emojis as bullet points because, again, you're going to get pointing hand. Very important fact. Pointing hand. Very important fact. Pointing hand. And it can get repetitive and annoying, quite frankly, for screen readers. So that's one of those tough things, but something to keep in mind, right? Just something to keep in mind.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and let me just go ahead and raise both of my pointing hands and tell you that I am a major culprit for that one. Because again, visually, it's cute. And so this is why we're having this conversation, right? To think, okay, when you're looking at it, visually, it can look great, but how is it going to be consumed? And I really love your point about the choice of consumption. I actually enjoy having captions, even though I can hear perfectly well. Sometimes when I'm watching certain things, depending upon distractions or depending upon the sound, sometimes when I'm watching things with certain accents, I enjoy. But more than that, it is my understanding. I don't recall the percentage exactly, and maybe you know it. I feel like it's somewhere upwards of 80% that people are scrolling through their phones on mute watching videos. And so if you do captioning, they'll be able to check it out. And not for nothing, I remember the days of watching my little ones and trying to get them to nap or to mellow out. And, you know, I'd be on my phone, but it had to be completely muted. Right? Because I was like, for the love of all that's holy, do not wake them up, you know? So I was on mute. And so people who had captions were going to get my attention.
Yes, exactly. I'm the same way. I feel like to get me to push the button to make noise requires something to interest me. And if it's just a talking head, that's not enough, right? I need to see more that will get me to turn that sound on.
Makes sense. Okay, so great. So captions and or transcriptions, and if you have some specific recommendations, we can add those in the show notes. And then emojis. Oh wow, yeah, that's like literally we're gonna stop recording, and I'm gonna be like, let me go edit a few things.
Well, and here's the thing, like full disclosure, my website still has pages where I have used emojis for bullet points. Now, is it going to be that way forever? No, it won't, because I do want to change it. But the other point and a really important takeaway I'd like people to get out of this is that you can't do all the things all at once. It's unrealistic. It's unrealistic. We are imperfect. We make mistakes. We're going to make mistakes. So the most important thing is just to keep these things in the back of your mind. And then when you have time, when you're updating your website the next time or whatever, this message will stick with you. You'll see your bullet pointed emojis and you'll remember, oh, I should change those back. So yeah, if you've got time to go do all these big sweeping changes, great. But if not, put it in the back burner, get to it when you have time, and know that little by little, you're still making a difference.
Yeah, that's such an important point. And even through the lens of productivity, right? It's not realistic to be able to do everything at once. And nor is it necessarily, you know, effective. So look at it this way. The next time you go to do a post, the next time I go to do a post, I will totally have this in mind. And I will make adjustments accordingly. I'll remember to keep it limited, to put the emojis at the end and not worry so much because I have to tell you, sometimes I'm like, which emoji would be good? Well, guess what? Maybe none. None would be good. So there you go. The next time you do something, make an adjustment. The next time you're in there updating things, make some adjustments and just keep this in mind as you go.
Exactly.
Okay. Any other?
Oh, I could go forever. It's just how much time you have. We could talk about alt text on images, making sure that anytime you upload an image, there is descriptive text that will tell somebody what the image shows.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. Since there are so many, we're trying to grab just a few here that it's like, here's a great place to start in
Yeah.
terms of awareness and making some small, doable changes that are going to have a big impact on you and your business and your interaction with the world. So the captions were great, emojis and the screen readers, such a good point. I really like the alt text one, and that was on my list of questions. So why don't we dig into that as a third?
Sure. So alt text is the shortened version of alternative text. And basically, what that means is anytime you upload an image or a GIF, if somebody is blind or uses a screen reader or has vision impairments, they may not be able to perceive what is in that image or GIF. So you will write an alt description that says what's in the image. Now, I have a whole podcast episode on this topic. So again, we're going to kind of just scratch the surface. But the most important thing is that you want to make sure for the context of your post, if we're talking about social media content, you want to describe anything that's contextually important. So I use an example often that if I'm showing a picture of my two kids standing in front of Niagara Falls and there is a photo bomber in the background, if the point of my content was to show my kids at Niagara Falls, I can ignore the photo bomber and just talk about my two children standing in front of Niagara Falls. If, however, the photo bomber is hilarious and my point is to point out this funny face the photo bomber is making, then I'm going to want to say it's my two kids being photo bombed in front of Niagara Falls. Does that make sense? So it's like, it depends upon what the context is.
Yeah. So again, really what this all goes back to is creating a way for people, no matter what limitations they may have, to understand what's going on and what's happening. So yeah, context matters. Boy, does it. And in this case, even more so. So with that, and I'd definitely love to point to that episode. So we'll make sure to get the link to your podcast episode in the show notes so they can listen further about this. But my question too is like, if it's simply a straightforward photo of me, right? Okay. Blonde, goofy looking, like, is that necessary? Is there ever a time when it's okay or optional, or do you just keep it super simple?
So the only time you wouldn't need to use anything is if the image is purely decorative. It's a swirly shape that's just
something
decorative.
from Canva, right? That
right.
they've
something swirly or whatever or cute. But I would say even if it's just a photo of you, just write headshot of Lisa. That's it. That's all you have to put. You could put if you're smiling. Sometimes I put that. Sometimes I'll make note of what shirt I'm wearing. If I'm wearing a hot pink shirt. And the reason you want to point out sometimes colors is some people may be able to see the picture may just be blurry.
Right.
So then they may be able to identify, oh, that's clearly the shirt she's wearing because she said she's wearing a hot pink shirt or something like that. So I would still describe that, but it's totally fine, especially if it's on your website, to just refer to yourself and, as you. You don't have to go deeper than that. Photo of Lisa, smiling, headshot, something like that.
Right. And I think this is a really good point that alt text, I mean, there's a spot for it when you're designing, your website pages. So maybe going in there and like, again, the next time you're in there updating something, just on that page, you find a few images, you add some alt text as a consideration. And then in terms of captioning on like social media, Instagram, for example, where do we place it?
So there's a twofold answer. Most platforms like Instagram and Facebook do have a back end place where you can put it when you go into the image.
Okay.
To make things easier, you don't have to use that. An alternative that is at this point in time, things are always changing. But at this point in time, everything I know, the alternative is totally acceptable. And it's just to put it at the end of your caption. This is what I do a lot on Instagram. I'll post whatever my caption is. And then I'll do 2 spaces. That's just the way I prefer to do it. I'll do a bracket and I'll say image description. Photo of Meg with oldest 2 daughters. Bracket. Something like that. So I find that typically is easier than having to click around and find the back end way to do things. But I will tell you, most platforms have some sort of automatic detector to try to fill in the alt text for you because they know people don't typically do it. But it's grossly inaccurate. It's very inaccurate. And if it's not accurate, it's not accessible. So it's another reason why it's important for us to take those extra steps and make sure it's accurate.
Right. And if we're doing this, I suppose another bonus to this, if you will, is that we can also keep it authentic.
Sure.
Because
Yes.
I do have the option to say a headshot of Lisa with goofy grin
Right.
if I want. So,
I actually have one more thing I just want to mention too that we didn't touch on is that the alt text for images is also beneficial if you're like me and you have slow internet. So if the image doesn't load, the alt text will be displayed. This is really common with emails too. Some people have images turned off in their emails. So then the alt text will show up in the email or again on social media or on the website or whatever. The alt text shows up when the image doesn't load. So just another little tidbit where it's not just an accessibility issue. It can also help people who RV full time and have really bad internet.
I think the point right there, and it goes back to what you're saying about the choice, about now we're looking at people consuming information in different ways because they're learning how they consume information better. And so, given that, and I know I've always been a very visual person, but visual too, in that when I write something down and I see the words. So it's not just the pictures that do it. So, again, going back to accessibility in its true traditional definition is that you are able to access it. And the other thing you're speaking of with the slow internet is making it quicker, that you're like, oh, it's a headshot of Lisa, not missing anything.
Keep scrolling.
Yeah, keep scrolling. It's not a problem. I know what she looks like, but that's a really good point. Okay, fabulous. I think that these three are really good to start. And the other question that I had, and I want to ask it because I want to make sure that we get beyond objections that we may have. And I was curious what you've seen in terms of what the resistance might be for this, especially from those who mean well. I can understand for some are like, I'm overwhelmed. I don't have time for this. What are the objections that you're seeing and how can we help release those so we can take some really strong, simple, but strong steps?
I think that the biggest thing is just not knowing. We don't know what we don't know. We don't know what we don't know. If you don't have somebody who's deaf or blind or colorblind in your immediate family, you may not know these things. You just might not know. So I think number one is awareness, like you talked about, being aware of what some of these issues are. And I think the second thing is saying to yourself, well, how many blind people are there really in my audience? And I'm just picking one demographic, right? You can substitute blind for deaf or colorblind or whatever. How many people really are there in my audience? And it's tough because right now there probably are none. And the reason there's probably none is because they can't consume your content. So it's like, I feel like we have to take a step back and realize that we're not just creating content for the people that are currently in our audience, but for the people that we want to be in our audience in the future. And the only way we're going to begin to attract deaf business owners, for example, is if we make our content accessible to deaf business owners. And so we just have to be aware of those things. We have to be willing to go the extra mile, to take that extra step, even if we don't get a sticker or a pat on the back or a cookie in return immediately. You know what I mean? Like entrepreneurship can be a very thankless job, right? So we just need to be willing to do the extra step, do the extra work, and know that we're making the online space a little bit more accessible, even if somebody's not recognizing us for it right now.
Absolutely. And the other thing to this, and it happens with so many choices that we make and challenges that we put on ourselves to make this world a bigger, better, brighter place, is that we are modeling for the next generation. We are showing them what's possible. We are making it a given. I mean, when you think about how the technology has changed and what we do now, that's just standard. The captioning is a great example. That's something that I can remember that just maybe it wasn't that common in terms of my world. Like you said, we can toss the word privilege around or whatever you want, but We live in bubbles. We do.
Mhm.
And that wasn't a big thing. And now it's a given and it's brilliant. And it's brilliant for reasons we never even knew. like like being able to quietly watch while your child is napping and things like that. So I think that that's a wonderful thing. The other challenge, and I think we've touched upon it a little bit, is really just, oh, do I have time? What's this going to take? I think the answer is, don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm understanding from you is it doesn't take that much to really open up the accessibility.
Yeah, baby steps, little bit at a time. I mean, it's the same strategies I tell people for figuring out social media. You
Yeah.
learn one thing, you master it, and then you move on to the next thing and you master that. And then it's like a snowball. Things get easier and easier and easier. And I'll tell you, like being in this space and having done a ton of research and learning and continuing to do that, because it's never ending. People
Mhm.
ask, like, how long does it take to learn this stuff? Forever. It's constant. You're always learning, right? Language changes.
The idea of baby steps, right? We take baby steps, right? Simple, small, like social media. That's a great point.
So we take those little baby steps, master one thing, move on to the next thing, master that, and continue to move on. And it will get easier. And now it's like second nature for me to evaluate new things that I see. Like anytime a new trend hits social media, we want to jump and be on top of that trend immediately. But the danger is we have to take a step back and evaluate, is it accessible? Is it inclusive before we hop on that train? So it gets easier the more you're doing it. And I don't even think you need to be doing it a ton, right? Spend a little bit of time each week, make some little changes, and you'll be better off in the long run.
And this is something that you are constantly keeping track of and providing us updates on, right? So if we
Oh,
follow
yeah.
you, you will keep us in the loop as to what's out there as we keep learning, right?
Yeah, I totally rebranded my business. I feel like I found where all of my like interests and my mission actually like merged into one. The podcast, the business, it's all called Just Marketing. So it's just as in justice, not as in only, just marketing. And we talk about inclusivity and accessibility. We talk about language. We talk about formatting on your blog and on social media, all of those things, and making money because it is marketing. We are making money. You can be inclusive and make money at the same time.
Yeah, I love that you talk about being accessible, inclusive, ethical, and profitable. And yes, all of it together can happen. Okay, so where can we find the podcast and you? Where can we follow you? Where are you online?
So the best place to find me is megbrunson.com. That's kind of my central hub. You'll find links to everything there. Just Marketing, the podcast is on your favorite podcast player, wherever you're listening to this podcast. Videos are on YouTube, transcriptions are on the blog, and I'm most active on Facebook and Instagram. I'm especially loving Instagram Reels right now. So I'm at the Meg Brunson on Instagram.
Okay, awesome. I'll have all those links in the show notes. And with that, are you ready for a little more fun with a rapid wrap up?
I'm ready. I'm ready.
Okay, fill in the blanks for me, please. A song that lifts my spirits, makes me dance.
Motown Philly, Boys to Men.
Oh,
It's like
that's
my favorite
classic.
song.
Oh, yeah. Anything Boys to Men, man, just
And I
so
love
good.
that we're at that age and stage where they'll play it at the grocery store so I can bust a move and embarrass my kids while shopping.
Now that's accessibility right there. Okay, how about a quote or a mantra that inspires me that I love to share?
So one that's very related to my business right now is that diversity is a reality, a resource, and a responsibility,
Whoa.
right?
I'm taking time to scribble this down because that's a good one. Okay, and speaking of resources, a book, app, anything that's made my life better.
I mean, it may be cliche in the entrepreneurial space, but it's Trello for me. I mean, my husband is on Trello. We do our shopping list on Trello. I do business stuff on Trello. And the fact that it's on my desktop and on my mobile phone, it allows my house and my business to run smoothly. It's my favorite app.
You're not the first person to mention it.
I'm sure.
I happen to personally really like it. Had Taylor Mobley on the podcast, and she talked about using it for business productivity. It's all a matter of finding the one that you love. So this
Hmm.
is a great reminder. If you haven't found the one you love yet and you've got a thing for the visuals, you'll like Trello. Okay, and last but definitely not least, what are you grateful for today, Meg?
Oh, I am grateful. Gosh, this is like probably the easiest one and the hardest one. Like, how do you pick one thing? I'm grateful for our health right now. It's been a rough summer for my family. We've had COVID a couple times run through us. I'm grateful that right now my whole family seems to be healthy. I know that's not exciting, but it's like right now it's huge because we've had a rough summer.
Okay, let's be clear. There are no rules when it comes to practicing gratitude. And secondly, when you have your health, you have everything. So I am
Ah,
with you. Well, speaking of gratitude, I am so grateful for you and that we've been connected all this time and that I finally got to have you on the podcast so you could share your wisdom with us. So thank you, Meg, for shining your light so brightly in this world and for sharing it with us today.
this has been wonderful. Thanks, Lisa, so much for this opportunity to chat with you and your audience.
Thank you for joining me today. Your time is precious and limited, and I'm honored you chose to spend it with me. If you have feedback, questions, or want to schedule a chat, head to positivelyproductive.com/connect. And if you are looking for any of the resources referenced on the podcast, from books to products to training and more, go to positivelyproductive.com/resources.